The wind was sharp and cold that night. The red moon hung low in the sky, casting a strange glow over the dark forest. Every creature had gone silent, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. At the edge of the forest stood tall iron gates, twisted like thorns. Behind them rose the ancient castle of Aurelia, home to the vampire queen and her court. Inside, candles flickered against stone walls. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and goblets of red wine. The nobles danced in silks and spoke in hushed voices, but their smiles were empty, their hearts colder than the stone beneath their feet. Suddenly, the great doors of the castle creaked open. The music stopped. A tall figure stepped into the hall. His clothes were torn. His body was covered in mud and blood. His eyes, golden and fierce, scanned the room like a beast hunting prey. He had the look of someone who had traveled through hell to get here. The guards rushed forward, swords drawn, but the man didn't flinch. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. The room smelled of forest and fur. A werewolf. Gasps filled the hall. A beast? Someone whispered. I thought they were extinct. The queen, seated high upon her throne, stood slowly. Queen Seraphine was tall and graceful, with skin pale as moonlight and eyes like rubies. Her long black hair fell over a gown made of shadows and silver. She stared at the man, curiosity burning behind her calm face. Bring him to me, she said softly, but the command echoed like thunder. The guards grabbed him roughly, but he didn't fight. He looked only at the queen. They dropped him before her. His knees hit the cold marble. He raised his head. Name, she said. Lacan, he growled. A name from the old wars, she whispered. She stepped closer. The court watched in silence, unsure if she would strike him down or set him free. Why are you here? She asked. I followed the moon, he said, and the smell of blood. A hush fell. No one had spoken to the queen like that in years. She should have ordered his death. It would please the court. It would have kept order. But instead, she stared into his eyes and saw something else, strength, sorrow, and something even she couldn't name. Put him in chains, she said, but do not harm him. I will speak to him again. The nobles whispered. Some were shocked. Some were angry, but none dared question her. As the guards dragged Lycan away, Seraphine watched him go. There was something strange about this werewolf, something dangerous and familiar. And deep in her heart she knew. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something that could change everything. Deep beneath the castle of Aurelia, the dungeon was cold and dark. The only light came from a small torch on the wall. The sound of dripping water echoed in the silence. In the center of the stone chamber, chained by the wrists, sat Lycan. His head leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed, but he was not asleep. His sharp ears caught every sound above him, the creaking of floors, the footsteps of guards, and the distant humming of the queen's court. The silver cuffs burned against his skin. Silver was deadly to his kind, still he showed no pain. The door creaked open. Queen Seraphine stepped inside alone. She wore no crown tonight. No guards followed her. Only the long sweep of her dark cloak moved with her. In her hand, she carried a small iron key. Lycan opened one eye. Visiting your prisoner already? She didn't smile, but her voice was calm. You're not like the stories say. Neither are you. There was silence between them for a moment. She walked slowly toward him, her eyes never leaving his. I should be afraid of you, she said. He looked up. Then why did you come alone? Her hand moved to the key at her waist. She didn't unlock him, not yet, but she stepped closer, kneeling before him so they were eye to eye. I've ruled this kingdom for 100 years, she said softly. I've seen lies dressed as truth. I've seen loyalty bought with fear. But you walked into my hall with nothing but your name. And still, he said with a smirk, I'm in chains. She paused. Then slowly she reached out and touched the edge of the silver cuff. He flinched, not from pain, but from the warmth of her fingers. Tell me why you really came here, she asked. Was it for power, revenge, "No," he said. His voice was low like a growl carried on wind. "I came because something called me. Something ancient. I followed the moon, and it led me to you." She leaned back, surprised. Her eyes narrowed. "To me? There's a bond," he whispered. "I felt it the moment I saw you." Her heart beat faster. Vampires didn't fear much. But this was not fear. It was something deeper. Something forbidden. Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. A guard's voice spoke through the iron. "Your Majesty, the council demands your presence." She stood quickly, pulling her cloak around her. "I'll return," she said, eyes lingering on him. As she left, the door closing behind her, Lycon let out a slow breath. He had come seeking answers, but now he was bound not just by chains, but by a pull he didn't understand. A fire had started between them, quiet but hot, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But one thing was certain. Their fate had begun to twist. Night returned to Varelia like a velvet curtain falling over the sky. The stars hid behind thick clouds, and the red moon was covered. Something felt different that evening, tense, like the air before a storm. In the Queen's private garden, far from the noise of the court, Lycon walked slowly between tall rose bushes and ancient statues. His chains were gone, at least for now, though guards still watched from a distance. Queen Seraphine had ordered that he be allowed to walk the garden alone. A wild thing needs space, she had told them. Some thought she was being too kind. Others thought she had gone mad. Lycon didn't care what they thought. He walked with quiet steps, listening to every movement in the air. His senses were sharp. Something felt wrong. Then he heard it. The soft swish of cloth. The slight crack of a twig. He turned quickly, but it was too late. From the shadows, two figures jumped out. Both were dressed in dark cloaks, faces covered. Assassins. The first one lunged with a blade coated in silver. Lycon ducked, grabbed a stone from the ground, and slammed it into the attacker's head. The assassin fell, groaning. But the second one was faster. A sharp blade sliced across Lycon's shoulder. He growled in pain, and his eyes flashed cold. The wound burned. The blade had been poisoned. Lycon fought with fury, dodging and striking, but the poison made him slow. His legs felt heavy. His vision blurred. Still, he managed to land a heavy punch to the second attacker's chest, knocking the breath from them. He fell to his knees, the pain growing. Footsteps rushed toward him. Not more attackers, but guards, and behind them Queen Seraphine. She gasped when she saw him bleeding. Her eyes locked onto the fallen assassins, then on Lycon, who was struggling to stay awake. "Who sent them?" he asked through gritted teeth. Seraphine didn't answer. Her face was pale. She knew the truth already. Valthera. Her cousin. The one who had always wanted the throne. The one who had warned her not to trust the beast. The guards knelt beside Lycon, but the queen waved them away. She lowered herself beside him, her hand pressing against his wound. "He's under my protection," she said loudly, looking at everyone. "Touch him again, and you will answer to me." The guards obeyed. No one dared disobey her when she used that voice. She helped him stand, his arm around her shoulders. He was heavy, but she held him close. As they walked back to the castle together, everyone stared. A vampire queen walking with a wounded werewolf. It was a sight no one had ever imagined. But something had changed between them tonight. Not just respect, not just trust. It was something deeper. Something that would soon shake the entire kingdom. The sky over Varelia was still dark when the queen returned to her hidden chamber beneath the old chapel. Few in the kingdom knew this place even existed. It had been built centuries ago, a secret room meant for sacred rituals and old magic. Now it was the only place she could take him. Lycon lay on a stone bed in the center of the chamber. His breath was shallow, and his skin had gone pale. The poison from the assassin's blade was spreading through his blood. No werewolf could survive it for long. Queen Seraphine stood beside him, her face tense with worry. For all her strength, she felt helpless. "I've tried everything," she whispered to herself, "and still he fades." Then her eyes turned to the old book resting on the altar. It was the book of life and death, passed down by vampire queens before her. Inside was a forbidden ritual, one that could heal any wound or illness, but at a great cost. It required the queen's own blood, not just a drop, but a life-sharing bond. A part of her soul would mix with his. It was never meant for enemies, never for outsiders. But Seraphine didn't see Lycaon as her enemy anymore. She saw someone strong, brave, and loyal. She picked up the dagger from the altar, the blade thin and sharp. She held out her hand and made a clean cut across her palm. Dark red blood flowed, glowing faintly under the torchlight. She knelt beside Lycaon and opened his mouth gently. "I don't know what this will do," she whispered, her voice shaking, "but I won't let you die." She let her blood fall onto his tongue. At first, nothing happened. Then his body twitched. His eyes opened, glowing gold. His breathing deepened. His fingers curled into fists. But something else happened too. Seraphine gasped as a wave of heat passed through her chest. She saw flashes, images not her own. Forests, wolves, a child running through the snow. Lycaon's memories. At the same time he saw hers. The cold halls of the palace. The crown placed on her head. A lifetime of loneliness. Their hearts had touched. The ritual had bonded them more deeply than she expected. When it was over, Lycaon sat up slowly, looking around. "What did you do?" he asked. "I saved you," she said quietly. He stared at her. "No, you gave me part of your life." She looked away. "You're not just a prisoner anymore. You're something more." They sat in silence. No one else knew what had happened beneath the chapel. No one else would understand. But the bond between them had grown stronger than either of them imagined. And outside the chapel walls, danger was rising. The sun never rose in Varelia. Only the red glow of the eternal moon lit the kingdom. But this night felt colder than ever, like something dark was coming. Inside the great throne hall, Queen Seraphine stood tall in her black and silver robes. Her long hair was braided like a crown and her eyes were sharper than blades. But something in her chest felt heavy. Something she couldn't name. Beside her stood Lycaon. He had recovered, his wounds now only thin scars across his skin. Though the guards still watched him with fear, they didn't move against him. Not while the queen allowed him near. The nobles had gathered, dressed in deep colors and polished armor. And standing in front of them all was Valthera, Seraphine's cousin. Valthera wore red, the color of power. Her smile was cold, and her voice sweeter than honey, but filled with poison. "You protect a beast, dear cousin," Valthera said. "You give him food, freedom, and now your trust." Seraphine looked at her with calm eyes. "He is not a beast. He saved my life, and he was merely killed under your command." Valthera's smile faded. "You broke sacred law, Seraphine," she said sharply. "You performed a blood ritual with a creature outside our kind. That is not loyalty. That is weakness." Gasps filled the room. Seraphine stepped forward. "I did what I had to do to protect this kingdom. You speak of law, but what law protects us from dying hearts and cold lies?" Whispers grew louder in the court. Some vampires looked unsure. Others turned away in fear. But Valthera had been planning this moment for days, maybe even years. With a wave of her hand, soldiers in red cloaks entered the hall. They surrounded the queen and Lycaon with swords raised. "This is a royal betrayal," shouted Valthera. "The queen is no longer fit to rule. I take the throne in the name of Aurelia." Before Seraphine could move, 2 guards grabbed her arms. Lycaon growled and tried to fight, but he was outnumbered. A dozen blades pointed at his chest. "Don't," Seraphine cried. "You'll kill him." Valthera stepped forward, her eyes glowing with victory. "I won't need to," she whispered. "I'll just take everything you love." The queen was dragged down the hall as the nobles watched in silence. Her crown fell from her head and rolled across the floor, stopping at Lycaon's feet. He stood still, chest rising with rage, his fists clenched. They had taken her. But they had made one mistake. They had left him alive. And now the real storm was coming. The sky above Vampire was darker than usual, as if mourning the fall of its queen. The castle was under Valthera's rule now. Guards marched through the halls. The throne room had been cleaned of blood, but the memory of betrayal still echoed through the stone. Deep below the castle, in the cold prison chambers, Queen Seraphine sat chained in a cell. Her skin was pale, her body weak from days without blood. But her spirit was not broken. She stared at the wall, silent, thinking only of Lycaon. She didn't know where he was, or if he was still alive. But far from the dungeon, in the servant tunnels beneath the palace, Lycaon moved quietly. His body was covered in dirt and ash, and his golden eyes burned with purpose. A young blood witch named Naira led him. She wore a hood and carried a lantern filled with black flame. Naira had once served Queen Seraphine, and she had not forgotten the kindness the queen showed her when others treated her like a tool. "She's in the lowest cell," Naira whispered, "but Valthera has placed guards everywhere. This way is old, forgotten by most, but dangerous." "I'll take dangerous over doing nothing," Lycaon growled. They reached a hidden door made of dark stone. Naira spoke an old spell, and the door slid open, revealing the blood vaults, a twisting maze of tunnels once used to store ancient magic and secrets too deadly for daylight. The air was thick with dust and old whispers. Strange runes glowed faintly on the walls. Lycaon could feel the power in the ground beneath his feet. The path was narrow and full of traps, but nothing slowed him. Not when Seraphine needed him. They avoided 3 guard patrols. They crossed a broken bridge over an underground river. At last, they reached the prison's deepest cell. Seraphine was there. She lifted her head weakly as the door creaked open. "Lycaon," she breathed. He rushed to her, breaking her chains with his bare hands. She fell into his arms. "You came," she whispered, eyes shining. "I told you I would," he said, "even if I had to burn this whole place down." Naira handed Seraphine a small flask. Inside was healing blood from a secret source. As Seraphine drank, color returned to her cheeks. "We need to move," Naira said. "Valthera's soldiers will notice soon." Seraphine stood slowly, stronger now, eyes fierce again. "They took everything from me," she said. "But not my will, not my fight." Lycaon held her hand. "Then let's take it back together." They vanished into the shadows, leaving behind chains, darkness, and fear. The queen had escaped. And with the werewolf by her side, she was no longer alone. The forest beyond the borders of Vampire was wild and untouched. Tall trees stood like ancient giants, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. It was here, far from the vampire court, that Queen Seraphine and Lycaon found shelter after their escape. But they did not hide. They planned. Seraphine sat by a fire made of blue flames, magic fire that could not be seen by the eyes of her enemies. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with purpose. "We cannot go back alone," she said. "We need allies, fighters, souls who still believe in justice." Lycaon nodded. "I know where to find them." He left the next morning, running through the forests like a shadow. He traveled to the old hills, where werewolves once lived before they were hunted. There, in secret caves, he found survivors, young and old, hiding for years, waiting for someone to lead them. And they followed him. At the same time, Seraphine sent messages through ravens and whispers. She called upon outcast vampires, those who had been banished or betrayed by the High Court. Some laughed at first. Others feared Valthera. But when they learned the queen still lived, and that she walked beside a werewolf, they came. One by one. By the end of the second moon, they had formed a growing army in the wild, a mix of vampires, werewolves, and old blood witches. They called themselves the Crimson Fang. Lycaon trained them in the art of war. Seraphine taught them discipline and strategy. Together, they gave hope to those who had forgotten what it felt like to fight for something real. Then the day came. Seraphine stood before her army, wearing new armor. It was black like night and edged with red, a symbol of her rebirth. The crown she once wore was gone. In its place was a silver band carved with symbols of both wolf and bat. Lycaon stood beside her, silent but strong. His presence alone gave others courage. "We do not fight for revenge," Seraphine said loudly. "We fight for freedom, for those who were cast aside, for those who still believe in honor, not fear." The army roared in reply. They marched that night, moving through the woods like a wave of shadows. When they reached the walls of Varelia, the guards barely had time to sound the alarm. The battle had begun. Flames rose, steel clashed, spells lit up the sky. Seraphine moved like a storm, her sword glowing with old power. Lycaon tore through enemy lines like a force of nature. Valthera stood at the top of the throne tower, watching her world fall. The queen had returned, not with gold or crowns, but with fire, fury, and love stronger than any curse. The battle for Varelia had ended. The castle lay in ruins, smoke rising from broken towers and shattered walls. But in the center of the chaos stood Queen Seraphine and Lycaon, victorious yet changed forever. Valthera was defeated. Her dark magic had been broken by the silver medallion Lycaon wore, and her power was gone. The nobles who once followed her fled into the night. Seraphine looked around at the faces of those who had fought for her, the vampires, werewolves, and witches who had come together in hope and courage. For the first time in centuries, the kingdom felt alive again. But the queen did not return to the old throne. The cold, lonely sea of power no longer called to her. Instead, she and Lycaon stepped away from the shattered castle and into the moonlit valley, a hidden place where sunlight touched the earth softly and the moon's glow warmed the night. Here, they built a new home, not just for themselves, but for all who wished to live free from fear and hate. The valley was filled with life. Wolves howled beneath the stars, and vampires walked in peace among them. There was laughter, music, and light where once there had been only shadows. Seraphine and Lycaon ruled together, not as queen and prisoner, but as partners. Their love had grown from fire and struggle into something strong and true. One evening, beneath twin moons that hung low and bright, Seraphine turned to Lycaon. "Do you regret coming here? Following the moon to this cursed place?" Lycaon smiled, his golden eyes soft in the moonlight. "I was a stranger to your world once," he said. "But you showed me that strength comes not from where we come from, but from what we choose to protect." She took his hand, her fingers warm against his fur. "And I learned," she said, "that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that sometimes the greatest power is found in letting someone in." They stood together, watching the night bloom around them, their future open and bright. The world had changed, and so had they. For the first time, vampire and werewolf lived as one. A new dawn of fire and flesh had begun.